This video is brought to you by Rhino Shield. This is the newest iPhone 14 Pro, the most powerful iPhone of them all, yet almost equally as powerful as its aesthetically similar predecessor. Unlike the crazy foldables of today, one might say that it's very stiff, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it makes it traditional. What's more, with greater reason, it can be considered a tool, and tools are not usually items you can brag about. To illustrate my point, if this is the iPhone 13 Pro, this is the iPhone 14 Pro. Both do a great job, but one is better, given your perspective and budget. Despite its initially monotonous vibe, the 14 Pro still has something to show off for itself, but is it enough to stand out or just okay to blend in? I've broken down my thoughts into a few sections, so to give you a perspective, let's start with how I use the phone. The reason I replaced my beloved Mini was the camera capabilities. I'm an intentional photo taker. I leave the expansion of my family album to my dear wife, who's terrific at capturing all the intense shots with the kids. Most of my photos are related to my work. For example, product shots, social media posts, thumbnails. For me, the improved 48 megapixel primary lens is a reason alone to upgrade, since it allows me to create even better product shots, even if I don't have the main gear at my disposal. I'll show you some examples later. I also use my phone to take notes, manage my business, and create products like my recently released iPhone widgets. If you want to learn more about them, you can check out my recently released tutorial, which I'll link at the end of this video. Finally, I got into editing and creating short-form content directly on the phone, which takes great advantage of the updated internals. Regarding internals, I've honestly stopped caring about benchmarks, since all most recent iPhones run silky smooth and as advertised. The newly released chip based on 4nm architecture offers leading performance and efficiency, which is essential for the freshly introduced always-on display, which I'll talk more about in a second. By the way, have you ever wondered what happens after the 1nm chips? Picometer? Anyways, the bottom line is that the A16 Bionic might not be a minor upgrade in terms of technology development, yet it is negligible if you come from an A15 iPhone from last year. Suppose you're coming from a non-promotion or 120Hz iPhone, like the iPhone 11 or 12. In that case, the 14 Pro will feel significantly smoother, not necessarily because of the new internals, but because of the higher refresh rate. If you come from an iPhone 13 Pro though, you won't honestly notice a difference in the way you interact with the phone. At least, I didn't. Also, new to the iPhone 14 Pro is the roller coaster detection. Crash detection. This is a feature that I can genuinely appreciate, and as far as I can tell, it's available worldwide. According to Apple's website, it might require manual input if the country-specific emergency service requires inputs like press 1 Nevertheless, emergency contacts are still notified. The iPhone 14 Pro comes with a slightly updated 6.1-inch display. The bezels are ever so slightly thinner than those of last year's iPhone. The display itself is again the gorgeous 120Hz ProMotion Super Retina XDR with 460 pixels per inch. This time, the minimum refresh rate has been brought down to a minuscule 1 Hz, which boosts power efficiency. Then comes the updated 2000 nits peak brightness. Now, while it's not a feature that I noticed initially, it definitely made itself known as I started responding to a message under direct sunlight. It's great. What about external features? Given my location, I still get to enjoy a physical SIM card slot. And I have to be honest, I'm actually on board with ditching the SIM slot altogether. If you think about it, since we have the technology to add and remove eSIMs with just a tap of a button, why bother using something from 21 years ago? Some say it's yet another way of keeping you locked into the Apple ecosystem. While Apple is genius at doing that in other areas of their devices, I see the eSIM as a step that ditches old tech in the name of new digital standards. On a side note, have you noticed the much smaller earpiece recess? It's just a skinny opening towards the top bezel, which will definitely require new screen protectors. I'll be releasing new iPhone accessories videos soon, so if you end up enjoying this video, subscribe, because why not? Despite loving these space black and dark colors from last year, I hate the dust that accumulates around the ginormous camera rings. Since my white iPhone mini, I've fallen in love with the white-silver combo, and that's what I chose for the 14 Pro. I honestly think it looks fantastic even with a case. Talking about cases, this is the Solid Suit iPhone 14 lineup of Rhino Shield. The Solid Suit case provides a premium finish with maximum protection thanks to the shock spread material, which is super tough. The Solid Suit is an excellent option for all iPhone 14 models if you're into minimal looking yet very protective cases. Of course, if you want to spice things a bit, you can enjoy Rhino Shield's customizable buttons and camera ring. By the way, these are some of the clickiest buttons I've ever used on a case. The case itself is easy to remove, preventing permanent loosening while providing a snug fit. If you are into more playful protection, the Mod NX and clear cases are also a category you should check out since they yield a plethora of designs and color blends. Combining their cases with their new grips, which have limitless customization options, can give your device easy one-handed use and the ability to prop the phone both horizontally and vertically. Grab your phone case and grip and take advantage of Rhino Shield's special offer for 20% off in the first week and 10% afterwards using the code ThisIsE14 and the first link in the description below. So, Dynamic Island and Always On. It is clear that these UI features separate the 14 Pro from the pack. Before we talk Pirates and Islands, however, I'd like to say that in my early Samsung days, I was fascinated with the always-on displays. Yet this time with the iPhone 14 Pro, I'm more conflicted than delighted. It looks cool initially and it's pretty clever. For example, it stays off in your pocket or when it's placed face down. Also, when you leave it in the room, it shuts itself off and automatically comes back on upon your return. I think it uses the Apple Watch for proximity. But overall, it's not a feature that I'm really into. For example, the always on the Apple Watch makes a lot more sense because it has a purpose. You can always glance at the time discreetly and off angle. On the other hand, the phone feels more like a distraction to me, constantly thinking I have just missed a notification. Don't get me wrong, technically, it's very well executed, but I don't think I'll use it much longer. And there is the Dynamic Island. As an ex-app designer, I'm absolutely enthralled by the level of detail and fluidity that the team behind this feature has achieved. It is yet another testament that a design flow can be converted into a bespoke feature with the help of outstanding UI and craftsmanship. The island feels alive, it's fun and paves the way for future iPhone improvements that follow the same fluid signature. For example, Siri can easily morph from it, so does the volume control. Also, and as always, the iPhone is easily recognizable by its silhouette. Even Apple says meet the new face of iPhone, and I can bet the iPhones of tomorrow will also feature the Dynamic Island. If you want to make the most out of the screen real estate of iOS 16, make sure to check out my iPhone home screen and iOS 16 setup video. In terms of cameras, I would refrain from bombarding you with specs, but rather focus on the two areas where the iPhone 14 Pro potentially separates from all previous models and turns into the ultimate tool for the content creators and social media influencers of tomorrow. We all know that the iPhones are the leading video smartphones. With the 14 Pro, more than ever, we have the perfect device for creating video content with both the front-facing camera for vertical videos and the 4K cinematic mode for the primary video shooter. See, if the previous iPhones were cool gimmicky devices that also allow you to make phone calls, I see the iPhone 14 Pro more than ever as a tool. If you want to start a YouTube channel, for example, and develop it into a business with just a phone, the 14 Pro seems like the perfect $1,000 investment for that, as it closes the gap with mirrorless cameras even further. The same goes for the 48 megapixel sensor on the back. For example, it allows me to take very crisp and detailed photos that I can use for thumbnails like I did for this video. I think we're at the point where if someone asks me if they should buy a point-and-shoot camera for like $1,000, I'd recommend the 14 Pro because it's not just a camera anymore. Ever since my iPhone mini days and given my daily habits, I have surrounded myself with charging solutions. I'm not a gamer, yet I consider myself a power user. For example, we use the iPhones for video projects like my Ultimate Widget videos and constantly use it as assisted camera equipment as well as a device for beauty shots. Even on the heaviest of work days, I have had a hard time killing the 14 Pro entirely at the end of the day. However, I wouldn't call it radically different from what the 13 Pro delivered. I can confirm solid battery performance with minor juice increases if the always-on display is turned off. Regardless of my solid battery impression, my experience with the device seems more buggy to me. There's nothing major here, but I do notice quite a few glitches, most of which I witnessed in the lock screen media control player. Luckily, I've never witnessed the buzzy camera issues or the rotating screen of death. Yet at this software version of iOS 16, things are not as rock solid as past iPhone releases. Crash detection being a trigger on roller coasters, for example. Despite the software issues which get fixed relatively quickly, the 14 Pro is a good recommendation and the primary phone for me until next year's release. Of course, it is not the iPhone Mini Pro which I wished for a while back, but I'm still as confident in relying on the 14 Pro to be a more inconspicuous yet invaluable tool throughout the year. Is it worth upgrading from the 13 Pro? I'll leave that to you to decide, but no. By the way, as many times as I've mentioned the iPhone 13 mini, do check out my review of the mini if you haven't and find out what it is that I'm gushing about. Also, be sure to check out my widget home screen setup videos which have generated heavy interest recently, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and my weekly newsletter. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure. This is E, over and out.